fan from home can watch the game from anywhere on the field of play, not just from the TV, from the camera views, but they can go, right, I want to be like, as if I'm that kind of player. And the technology has moved on really, really quickly. I think kind of Canon, Intel in the early days kind of doing it, but needed too many cameras where it kind of cost prohibitive. But now it's really developed on. Canon's kind of moved forward with that. And I think obviously our digital assets can kind of play a part in that. But to be kind of feel like you're like in the game and getting closer to that space, I think that's really, really kind of exciting. I think it'll move forward, super, super quickly. But yeah, the intelligence and the experience that come with that could be, pretty phenomenal.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SportsTech ALLSTARS podcast. This is Rohn again, and I'm continuing our theme this month of focusing on innovation in stadium or venue tech. This is, of course, in partnership with the Bundesliga, with the DFL, Deutsche Fußball League, leading up to their sports innovation event happening on the 20th and 21st of March, if I'm not mistaken. You can check out details on their website, sportsinnovation.de. The idea of the event, if you don't know about it, is that the Bundesliga or the DFL uses this one day. It's an exhibition game between two Bundesliga sides where they showcase all of the coolest tech that they're messing around with. So from body cams to innovation in broadcasting tech to a lot of back-end stuff as well, operational stuff as well. One such company that might help with operational activities relating to venues is a company named OnePlan, who is my guest for today. I've got Paul Foster, the founder of OnePlan, on the show. OnePlan is a company that does digital twins for events and venues. To tell you more about it, let's have Paul. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks very much for the invitation and looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, we'll have a nice, easy little chat, Paul. It's a Tuesday, Wednesday morning. How are you doing? It looks like pretty bright outside behind you.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, coming back kind of off the holiday season, and I think things are kind of ramping up for us. So yeah, it's been a good summer, but yeah, looking forward to the next kind of couple of months and see what's in store for us.
Yeah, ramping up is a good way to put it, I'm sure, because you guys must be getting up for Paris 24, which is how I got introduced to Paul at an event in Paris at Viva Tech. And I found out that OnePlan was making the digital twin for the Olympics, for Paris 24. So I'm sure there's a lot that you can, or that we'd like to hear from what you guys are doing there exactly and how you're helping the event. But before I get to OnePlan, I always want to know a little bit about the person that I'm speaking to. So Paul, maybe a little bit of background, where have you come from and what took you to starting OnePlan?
Yeah, sure. So I'm kind of a crowd scientist, I guess, by trade. Paris is the 6th Olympic and Paralympic Games that I've worked on. But actually, for me, it's actually started on the sports side. So in Beijing 08, I was the team manager of the Great Britain wheelchair basketball team. We won a bronze medal in Beijing. We beat the USA in the bronze medal game, which was an amazing experience. And I kind of came back, and then I joined UK government, advising on things relating to Paralympics, venues and infrastructure, leading up to the London 2012 Games. It was a fascinating period of time to be in the UK because we were going through a change of government and also the economic kind of crash kind of happening. And at the same time, we were trying to kind of put on Olympic, Paralympic Games and asking for more money to do more things. And I led a big piece of work to look at people movement outside of venues. And obviously in a major city, that's particularly kind of challenging because there's the business as usual of everybody, moving and making their way around. And I then moved over to the organising committee and oversaw what's called kind of the last mile operations of the London Olympic Park. So getting 250,000 people in and out of that venue each day. And I think it was kind of number 2 on the security risk register kind of at the time. So yeah, big operation, multifaceted, working with Met Police, TfL, security services and the venue itself. Fortunately for us, it all went kind of really, really well, and it was very successful, and it was a great kind of experience for me. But what I was always fascinated by and also frustrated by is everything being planned in one of 2 platforms, PowerPoint and Excel. So specifically talking about the operational planning, so where the human resources go, where the signs go, where the barriers, tents, cabins, containers, all these kind of things. Generally, people will cut and paste from Google Maps, or they'll cut and paste from an AutoCAD, drop it into PowerPoint and do their planning. Now, if you're in security and I'm in maybe the catering, cleaning and waste team, our plans are disconnected from each other. You send me your plan and I could send it anywhere in the world. So the big kind of challenge of that is around security, around kind of, generating the single source of truth is what we like to kind of call it. So that's where the concept and idea for OnePlan originally started. And a few years later, I kind of decided to kind of go for it and actually build this thing.
Yeah, best way to do it. Try to solve a problem for yourself, and maybe then figure out maybe is this a big enough problem to solve for a lot of other people. Sounds
Yeah.
like that's where the origins of the company was. Just to touch on one thing, because you mentioned the Paralympics, we've actually had a British Paralympian on this podcast very recently. We had Ali Jawad. I don't know if you know him. He won, I
Yeah.
think, a silver. Was it in the Rio Games in powerlifting? And
Okay.
yeah, last month's theme was accessibility or sports tech for the differently abled. And Ali has a startup, Accessorcise, which helps differently abled people find their fitness of choice. So yeah, bringing a few worlds together. But let's stay with OnePlan. All right. So you've identified this problem of planning is still happening in a prehistoric way in some ways, and you're trying to bring it to the new age. How does OnePlan do that, and what purpose does creating a digital twin serve?
Yeah, so the digital twin element, I guess, well, the 3D digital twin, what most people associate with digital twin, it didn't actually come till later. And I think it's important to say that, digital twin means different things for different people. For us, it's like a visual twin where you can see the venue and appreciate it, do site visits in different areas, we can simulate different things. But for others, it's about data. And it could be about dashboarding. It's about pulling different bits of data together in one dashboard to help kind of make decisions. So there's very different ways. And digital twinning's been big in heavy industry and aviation. So Rolls-Royce use it to simulate the blades on their engines, how long they will last in different conditions, how often they need to be replaced. Oil and gas use it to kind of simulate drill bits that go into the ground, how long they'll last when they need to replace it. So that investment in there is quite significant, but has a big benefit for them. So coming back to us on the 2D side, so initially what I wanted to do is go, right, I want to be able to plan an event site, but like on a Google Doc, but it has to obviously be kind of a map in the context of where the world is. So initially it's like, can I place some barriers on a map and someone else, can log in and see where I've done that. So that's where we kind of started with. We started to get kind of traction in festivals, road events particularly. And the interesting thing for us, then
Which
COVID
year
hit.
was this? When did you start?
Yeah. So 2019, and then 6 months after we launched, we got our first few people in. Then COVID hit, and it was like,
Right.
no one's doing events now. This is going to really kind of kill it. And then we looked at it for about 24 hours and actually said, no, here's an opportunity. And then we started to build in social distancing tools. So automatically calculating how many people can fit in an area, drawing lines out for queue systems and such like. And we went big on the kind of social distancing piece, and we were doing very, very early days doing webinars with 2,500 kind of people on there before the government guidance and such like came out to help people plan. And one thing through COVID, although there wasn't as many events as there would normally be, there was a lot of planning. People were planning again and again and again, and they had to be flexible. And things were changing. You weren't certain what happened next.
Mhm.
So actually, it kind of accelerated our kind of opportunity and more kind of people kind of using it, and it's continued on because people now realise this is more effective way to kind of plan things. It's certainly not kind of a COVID or pandemic reliant technology. And then about kind of maybe a year and a half into pandemic, there was a particular international federation that came to us and said, look, we love what you do in 2D, but we've got a venue in Serbia, which we're going to use for a World Cup event. We can't walk into the building because it's a COVID hospital. So can you do what you do in 2D and 3D? So we can plan where the branding goes. We can walk and tour around the venues because we can't do the site visits. We want to do them virtually. So we connected in with Epic Games, Unreal Engine, who are famous for the most famous computer game in the world, Fortnite. and we said, look, we want to use your gaming engine, and we want to put it on top of a GIS mapping system. And this is where we're unique, because a computer game can be anywhere in the world. Fortnite's a made up environment, but we actually need to be, very, very accurate to where you are in the world. So we kind of connected the two together. And unfortunately for me, Epic Games' kind of European head office is literally just down the road for me in Surrey. So I was able to kind of build that relationship. And within a couple of months, we built it, and we said, right, here it is. And then, it kind of grew and went from there. And then, you add on another 18 months, and we're the first ever startup to be an Olympic Games partner. And we're digitally twinning, most of the centre of Paris and most of the sports competition venues. So it all moved incredibly quickly. But I think the key thing I always say to people is, because we started with a problem, and we didn't necessarily say digital twins is going to solve all this. We actually what's the problem, understood the problem, and then it kind of evolved. And I think this is some of the downfall of some of the metaverse things. In terms of the metaverse, we're seeing, hey, everybody used the metaverse. It's like, well, why? You're like, what's its purpose? But we had a purpose first before we kind of developed what the technology would be.
And I wanted to come to that. Of course, you can't talk about digital twins or virtual worlds without dropping the M word, but we'll park that aside for a minute, and I want to address that later. But no, I mean, super interesting to hear how organic your story is effectively. I mean, it seems like your development came through requests, again, through solving problems for somebody else. And then also the story is pretty epic to find using gaming as the engine to drive a real world solution. So maybe talk about that use case specifically, since you ended there. What exactly are you doing for Paris 24? How are you helping them?
Yeah, so there's kind of multiple use cases, and they're using the 2D platform and the 3D. And an important thing to mention here is the two are connected together for one database. So if you move something in 2D, then it moves in 3D in kind of real time. Most people still prefer to plan in 2D because you get a wider kind of context. That is always really going to be the way people plan, unless you have specific kind of use cases. So one example on the 3D side is Olympic Broadcast Services using it to establish where they want to put their camera positions. And obviously, you can't really do that so well in 2D. In 3D, what we can do is we can accurately simulate the sun's position for any future date. So we can say, okay, July 2024, where is the sun's position going to be at 6 o'clock over Place de la Concorde? And we can get that very, very accurately. And what it'll do is simulate reflections on water, reflections off different surfaces, and also lens flare as well. So we simulate the individual camera specification. So how far I can zoom, how far I can pan, all those kind of things. And then they can look at, actually, we want it positioned here. Actually, at this time of day, we're going to have issues with lens flare from the sun and such like. And they can do all that kind of, simulation in one place. So that's just one of the use cases on 3D. The next one then was really driven by kind of environmental and cost savings. So we wanted to give access to all national Olympic committees, national Paralympic committees, and international federations. And actually, they're all getting access in the next kind of couple of weeks. Now, to use our technology, you don't need an amazing laptop or desktop, but you do need very solid kind of Wi-Fi, because we stream it in, and the whole idea is we give kind of access to anybody and everybody. Now, with the kind of challenge we were given, okay, that may be good for those that have got good Wi-Fi, but what about some of the smaller nations who may not have the budget, may not have kind of great Wi-Fi, and they just want to access things on mobile phones? And this is particularly for athletes and for those teams. Now, those guys don't need to simulate the sun's position. They don't need to look at camera positions. What they want to know is, where am I getting off the bus? Where's the changing room? Where's the field of play? Where's the media mix zone? Where's the anti-doping? And then back out again. So what we essentially enable the client to do is, in the digital twin, plot out a route and pick out the points. And what it does then is sends a request off to a server in the cloud. It'll create a 360-degree photo bubble. So essentially what we're doing is creating Google Street View in the digital twins. Mm-hmm. Now, when the end user uses that, it just loads up one photo at a time, which means you don't need kind of really good Wi-Fi or work on kind of 3G. So what we've done, we've adapted the very, very sophisticated software to be able to be used on kind of a more mass market kind of approach specific to that use case. Now, what do the athletes actually need to see and need to do? Let's look at that, and then let's provide the appropriate kind of solution for it. So again, I would always say that digital twins are very much in their infancy in our kind of sector. There's a lot more that can be done. Are we transferring these models into computer games, into Fortnite, and other things as well? There's potential for that. There's a lot more use cases to come, but as you mentioned earlier, like having it organically grow. So let's really, really deeply look at the use case and issue. And in some situations, it's not the 3D digital twin. There's as many use cases we've gone, actually, you don't need the 3D. You need to plan in the 2D because that's the way people can kind of work together. And that's where most of the users are. So there's as many thousands users using the 2D plans to kind of collaborate and work together. That's always going to kind of exist. And the other thing I would say is the most important part of 3D is the 2D. And getting that right first.
Interesting. I guess that's the foundation for what the application will deliver. So that's important to get right.
Yeah,
It's interesting that you mentioned Google Street View because that's the first thing you kind of visualize in your head. I guess that's as a normal
yeah,
user, everybody's seen it. That
yeah.
how do I get to, like, where am I going? How to figure that out? And you try to use Google to help you out. So using that for an arena or a large space like an Olympic Village or Olympic Park makes a lot of sense. Is that the most, let's say, used use case or the most relevant use case for the product? I mean, what you described with the broadcasting stuff sounds hella cool, but I can imagine that's a very fringe use case for a very specific set of users. So is the broadest one actually just logistics, like getting from point A to point B, or is there something else that you think that, hey, actually alongside logistics, there are a couple of others that are very widely used?
Yeah, and I think with the camera, we can also do it with security cameras as well, and you get into the realms of the security. So, really, I look at it in the life cycle of a venue or an event. So, let's take the LA Clippers. So we digitally twin Intuit Dome for the LA Clippers, their new venue that opens next year. And I think that's a brilliant one because we're going right from the start. So, initially, it was about showing the ownership, Steve Ballmer, former CEO of Microsoft, cool project to be involved in, what this venue is going to look like, and experience in that venue. So he was able to sit in his seat from home and say, okay, I can see what this venue is going to look like, and informing design decisions about the venue. And they made some pretty big kind of decisions and changes as a result of being in the digital twin. Now, next thing is they then need to sell the hospitality suites and the seats as well. So they're able to show people this is exactly what your hospitality suite's going to kind of look like, adjust it, doing that, show fans the views from the seats as well. And they have an amazing experience center in downtown LA, and a lot of our kind of digital twin assets are in there, but you can also sit in the seat and then you go into the digital twin and you can see the view from your seat and what it's going to be like and kind of being there. Next bit is then selling advertising space. So let's say they have Pepsi and Coke. I'm sure I don't know if they're talking to Pepsi and Coke or not, but let's say they had Pepsi and Coke want to kind of have some advertising space in the venue. They can change over the branding themselves and say, hey, Pepsi, this is what it's going to look like for you. Coke, this is what it's going to look like for you in the afternoon. But they're in control of it. They don't have to come to us to kind of render things out. They're in control of that asset. So they're now selling the advertising spaces in the venue. Next one on from that is then looking at operational planning. So let's move around the venue. Where potentially is there a pinch point for the crowds at certain times? Where could there be issues? And we can actually simulate crowd movement in there as well. So they're starting to plan operations, and that's where they start to bring in more external stakeholders. So maybe the fire marshal comes in and say, yeah, I want to understand how people evacuate and how that all works. Then training. So before the venue opens and it's still being built, you can show the workforce, hey, okay, this is how the venue is going to operate. This is your role. And we can do simulations in there. So if someone falls over or there's an incident, how do you deal with that? And then next stage in entering the fans. Hey, fans, this is your route you will take from parking your car or getting off the metro kind of into the venue. So they're familiar with, that experience. And I think the next stage then on is potentially kind of, virtual events. So you can hire venues all over the world if you pay your amount of money and you can hire it for a concert. Well, why don't you do that in the digital space as well? So there's one digital version of Intuit Dome. And it'd be great in the future, if you could go online and you could rent it for a particular kind of event and utilize that as well. So we're looking at that with a number of clients. So really, we wanted to do as many things as the physical venue, but we don't have necessarily kind of limitations. So I very much see that digital twin is a living, breathing thing that takes you from, infancy and the idea all the way through to kind of operations and upgrade of the venue. So we're digitally twinning crypto.com arena at the moment, and the initial use case around that is like, what's this venue going to look like when we do the refurbishment? Are there any kind of things that we need to think about, need to change, adjust? So working with the architect on that. So that's kind of the full span of things, but yeah, it's evolving really quickly. There's going to be a lot more to come.
I can imagine, and thanks for that. Actually, that really sets the spectrum of everything that's possible pretty well, and to tell us that hey, we can go right from helping you plan the event to just doing an event digitally, which is a whole other thing. And that's where I want to go now, because I remember when we first spoke, and I think you were talking about Paris 24. I think you mentioned that you're not doing anything fan facing. I don't know if that's changed since then, or you can correct me if I'm wrong. But clearly, you have that capability, because that's the first thing I thought of. Like, the first application is, hey, this is an incredible experience that you can deliver to fans. So how much of, let's say, the new requests that you're getting now from, let's say, crypto.com or the arena for the Clippers, or more clients down the road, are, hey, help us plan this event or plan this venue to be the best operationally that it can be, versus, hey, this is something that we want to build to drive fan experience, to drive revenue, to drive on that side of things. So rather than cost, it's more a revenue opportunity.
Yeah, so we've had a kind of deep look at this, and I guess our approach is, working with anybody what that solution wants to be and being interoperable. So how we see it is we're like the digital real estate, and they may want to transfer this model to use in different ways. So we're making it as easy to use and transfer into different systems as possible, because there are some great fan experience opportunities out there. We want them to be able to use this asset as long as the client kind of gives permission to kind of do that. So we see ourselves as that venue digitally, which you can kind of lease out, rent out. Some things we may do ourselves, but what we've kind of the approach we're kind of taken is keeping at our core on kind of operational side, but build a model that can be used for a kind of other purposes. Because when you want to start using things with a lot of concurrent users, that's when it definitely gets more challenging, and you need the big hardware providers in. We're very fortunate that we've got some really good relationships with those big providers. Obviously, we work really closely with Intel on the Olympics. You need some serious GPU, CPU, graphic card capability in the cloud to kind of do these things on kind of big scales. But we'd like to help, companies that are B2C focus, fan engagement focus, and use our assets to kind of go into those spaces. But yeah, it's not something that we're going to move into ourselves so much. Like I said, we'll facilitate that to happen, because there's so many great companies kind of out there. So we're really, really keen to work with them.
Interesting. So you see yourself more as the platform which can enable people to build different apps that they can
Yeah,
bring
I guess the
into the
assets.
digital venue. Yeah.
Yeah. So with a core kind of official asset, and I think there's a lot of work being done, and we've done a lot of work, significant work on IP, image rights, intellectual property. You could go online now and Google 3D model of Wembley Stadium. There's loads on there. They aren't architecturally accurate, but they look very, very familiar. And there, people are selling those and putting them into computer games and such like. Well, that's actually the IP of Wembley Stadium, or maybe even the architect. So people are making money off that kind of particular digital asset. And when we build a kind of asset, it becomes the only official version of that stadium. So if people want to use it or use a likeness of it, they have to use kind of this model of it. So what it does, it gives the client control in their digital environment. They have the control of their physical venue because they can put a fence around it and they've got a security guard at the front gate about what they do. But essentially, we're helping them to put those similar kind of guardrails in the digital space and protect their intellectual property. Because obviously, they at the moment, if there's lots of different versions of their stadium out there, someone could be using it to sell something, promote something which they don't want to. For example, it could be cigarettes or whatever they're not they don't want to be associated with. So here we're just helping them to kind of develop that. I think it's a real big emerging space now, is the whole kind of intellectual property and image rights around digital assets. I think
Right.
it's a kind of a really big piece. It's actually where I think the kind of NFTs could have played a part, but it was again, NFTs had a bit of a bad rap because the NFT was there before the problem had even been kind of what's the problem you're trying to solve. And actually, there is a challenge here around IP image rights, which NFTs could have a part to kind of play in. It just kind of came the wrong way around. Really, the solution came before the problem.
Yeah, on the NFT thing, I think that's still the underlying technology. There's nothing wrong, and the underlying technology is really
Yeah,
powerful. It's just about how it's used and the
exactly.
collectibles, whatever cash grab, unfortunate cash grab that we saw has given this bad rep. But I'm
Yeah,
confident, and maybe you are as well, that the underlying technology still has a lot of value to deliver, and it'll find
absolutely.
its day in the sun going forward. It'll make its comeback. Super interesting. I think again, we've done a good job of laying out how the relevant stakeholders, whether it's a fan, the organizer, or even the athlete you spoke about earlier, how they can interact with your solution. Moving away from OnePlan, what innovations in stadium or venue tech are you most excited about that either maybe you're already working on or you're not working on?
Yes, I'm really interested and looking closely at some of the technology around multiple cameras in the venue, so a fan from home can watch the game from anywhere on the field of play, not just from the TV from the
Mhm.
camera views. But they can go right. I want to be like you know, as if I'm that kind of player. And the technology has moved on really, really quickly. I think kind of Canon, Intel in the early days kind of doing it, but needed too many cameras where it kind of cost prohibitive. But now it's really developed on. Canon has kind of moved forward with that. And I think obviously our digital assets can kind of play a part in that. But to be kind of feel like you're like in the game and getting closer to that space, I think that's really, really kind of exciting. I think it'll move forward, super, super quickly. But yeah, the intelligence and the experience that come with that could be, pretty phenomenal. And then, there's also the potential for kind of the virtual reality then to kind of catch up with it. I'm still skeptical a bit on the virtual reality because again, people don't necessarily kind of want to be in there for kind of too long, and it's actually sometimes people feel that's a little bit isolating with the goggle on and people like sat around you, you're not kind of
Sure.
engaged with them. So I still think it's not quite there yet. Let's see what the Apple kind of solution does, and I know there's many others kind of working on something kind of similar. So I think that's not quite there yet, but I think in a couple of years it will be. But yeah, certainly that kind of immersive experience where you can, and then there was a really great one I think done of the Rugby World Cup in Japan. There was a little experiment done, I think New Zealand South Africa game, and you can literally pick where you are on the field and follow the game from any position. And it's incredible kind of experience to kind of really get a deep knowledge about how the game's played, how people are kind of moving off the ball.
Yeah, I think that a truly immersive experience is what I think every fan is like a dream world. Imagine if you were on the pitch, even if
Yeah.
it's digitally or virtually, while something was with your favorite players or important action happened. We've actually spoken to, I think you might know, Sponix. Sponix Tech is a company based out of, I think they're in Dubai and also in Qatar, but generally out of the Middle East. They move out a couple of places which do something similar. They'll come into that POV of the player or in different parts of the stadium. We've had them on the podcast as well. If anybody's interested, you can go check out that episode. But I agree that and the different forms of it. Either it's the fully immersive experience or just you're consuming a game in an animated experience. Like there are so many things that a fan can do now, which are related to how you set up the cameras in a venue. Very cool stuff. All right, Paul, let's talk about what's next. What's coming up for OnePlan? Sounds like, I mean, you rattled off a bunch of names already, so it seems like your client roster is building. Maybe you can drop a couple more or just generally talk about what's coming up for the next 12, 18 months for OnePlan.
Yeah, it's going well. We're kind of expanding, very globally. I think the 2D platform we're used in 110 countries, worldwide. We have kind of on that side of things, people can come on start using the platform for free today. So it's a very very kind of easy entry point. Obviously, the 3D side is kind of there's a higher price point, and then we're telling you kind of working with the team to understand and establish exactly how they want to use the platform, but. Yeah, we're looking to kind of grow out into different areas. We've got a number of cities we're talking to about digitally twinning the whole city. Um, We're
Oh,
talking to a number of the kind of big providers of venues kind of globally. We know we're currently doing Gillette Stadium. We're currently doing Crypto.com Arena. We just finished XL London, which is an amazing project, big extension they were kind of building out. So that's the first time we've kind of gone into the conference and exhibition space. So really good solution that we've been kind of providing there. But yeah, a lot of stadiums now are realizing kind of the benefit of it, the cost saving it can bring over a long period of time. So looking to expand on that. We are toying with some things on AI as well. We think it's kind of a lot of opportunities, but again, we'll look at first of all, what is the problem that people have, and then see whether like AI is a potential solution for that. And I think there's a bit to go with augmented reality as well. So looking at when you're out on site, kind of operationally, what is that sign, what is that configuration going to look like? And holding up a device and actually saying, okay, that looks like it'll fit there. That'll work kind of okay. So I think there's kind of more to be done in that space, and there's some good solutions in kind of real estate, in some of the other sectors. So we're always looking at other sectors to see what they're doing and see where someone's really kind of nailed a use case. But yeah, kind of lots more to come, and we're fortunate we've got an amazing team, real global team. And expanding into kind of all continents of the world. But yeah, it should be a really exciting year for us in 2024, leading up to the Olympic and Paralympic Games. So we're excited to be there, and hopefully, see lots of people in Paris as well.
yeah. Sounds like you guys are keeping busy. Let's put it that way. Lots
Yeah,
coming up, and wish you and the team the best of luck. For our listeners, if anybody wants to reach out to you, Paul, what's the best way to do that? Maybe LinkedIn or email.
yeah, LinkedIn's the best way. Great platform. So yeah, just drop us a note on there. Always kind of happy to talk to people. We're always looking for partners to kind of work with, looking at different kind of use cases. But we're very much partner focused. We want to help other people succeed as well. If that can tap into our technology, then great. If not, we're happy to kind of have a discussion. What's happening next, and help and work together. So yeah, we take a very kind of proactive approach to kind of partnering and working with other people.
Good stuff. All right, Paul Foster, you can reach out to him on LinkedIn. Before I let you go, Paul, my last question, it's my favorite one. I'd like to believe that we're all sports fans first, which is why we choose to work in this industry. So I'm curious to know what has been your favorite sporting moment, either one you consumed as a fan or maybe participated in as an athlete.
Oh, favorite sporting moment. Oh, that's a tricky one. So my kind of big sport is rugby. That's what I've always been kind of passionate about. Um, so I guess yeah, it's and I've been fortunate to watch the British Lions play and watch kind of England play rugby and what such like. But actually, my kind of team is Bristol. So I guess I go back to when I was a lad, watching kind of Bristol play their local rivals, Bath. Packed crowd when we could stand in the crowd with a beer, with a Cornish pasty, and I was fortunate to watch some of the great football and rugby players. But yeah, I saw kind of Austin Peashot, the captain of Argentina, the scrum half, who's now I think vice president of the rugby union, and we had like Simon Shaw kind of playing there. Henry Honeyball, I think it was back in kind of like the late 90s. Bristol had like an incredible team, and watching them in a packed crowd in the stand with like 12,500 other people against local rivals Bath was, an incredible experience. But real kind of like passionate team. But yeah, those were some of my, real enduring memories of watching sport as a kid.
Rugby, beer, and a Cornish pasty. It sounds
Cornish
about
pasty,
at
yeah,
least
yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
the British.
And the beer would be like a 2 pint beer kind of thing, but and you get like a giant Cornish pasty. So me and my dad would in the stand, and we'd have like we'd usually be cider because I was from the West Country, so you'd have cider and a Cornish pasty, and then it was there was always good banter in the rugby crowd, a lot of kind of like mick taken, but it was really good fun and really nice memories.
Sounds perfectly British. Paul, it has been a pleasure. And I love asking that question because the way you responded, the smile it brought on your face, and it usually ends the podcast with a smile as well. Thanks so much for taking the time for joining us.
Yeah, thanks very much. Really enjoyed the time. So thank you.
All right, that is a wrap for another episode. Like I mentioned at the top, if you haven't already, please do go check out the Sports Innovation Day from the DFL. You'll be able to check out a lot of cool stuff maybe other companies similar to what OnePlan is doing. Maybe OnePlan will be there. We can try to get them in on the DFL as well. Stay tuned. We have a lot more coming up in this theme. See you guys next week. Ciao.